brought to you by oneaauto.com, your source for quality parts and the best service on the internet.
Hi, I'm Mike from One Auto. I hope this how-to video helps you out. And next time you need parts for your vehicle, think of oneauto.com. Thanks.
In this video, we're going to show you how to change out the EGR valve, tube, and gaskets in this Dodge Ram. This one's a 2008 with a 5.7 liter Hemi, and the procedure is pretty much the same for 2006 to 2008 Dodge Rams. You'll need a new valve and tube kit from oneauto.com, a flat blade screwdriver, 8 to 10 millimeter sockets with a ratchet and extension, and some penetrating oil.
While it may not be necessary to remove the upper intake components on your motor in order to do this install, it only takes a moment to remove these parts. It gives you a lot more room to work and see what you're doing. Open the airbox by releasing the metal clips on the side and the rear. Pop it out of its holders. Release this hose from the front. And using a flat blade screwdriver, loosen the clamp on the rear of the inlet pipe. With that loosened up, work the pipe off of the box. Remove this assembly. The bottom half of your airbox simply lifts off its retainers, comes right out of the truck. Remove the two 10 millimeter bolts, one behind the alternator, one behind the oil cap, with a 10 millimeter socket, ratchet, and extension. Lift up on the airbox so you can access the intake air temp sensor at the front. Push down on the connector, remove it from the IAT, remove the airbox from the vehicle. The EGR valve is located on the front of the cylinder head on the passenger side, just below the alternator. Pull out the red safety tab on the connector. Push down on the connector tab and disconnect it from the EGR valve. Tuck it off to the side while you're working. Using an 8 millimeter socket and ratchet, remove the two bolts connecting the EGR tube to the EGR valve. You may want to use penetrating oil on the bolts that connect the EGR tube to the valve, as they're very prone to breaking. Remove the EGR tube from the valve. Allow it to rest off to the side. Remove the two 10 millimeter bolts on the front of the EGR valve. Remove the EGR valve from the front of the motor. The other end of your EGR tube is located in the top passenger side of the intake manifold, just behind the throttle body. You'll need a flat blade screwdriver to pry up and release this clip. Remove the other end of the EGR tube from your intake manifold. Here we have our old EGR valve we removed from the truck and our new EGR valve from 1A Auto. As you can see, we have the same 5-pin connector up top, the same valve chamber here. We have a new flange with the same mounting holes and the same size inlet to our cylinder head. Our EGR valve even comes with a new valve to head gasket, as well as a new valve to tube gasket. Here we have the old EGR tube from the vehicle, our new part from 1A Auto. You can see that they're the same diameter pipe, same bends, have the same seal and the same flange for the clamp on the end, as well as coming with a new heat-resistant wrap already installed. We're going to pre-assemble this part of the EGR valve before reinstalling it onto the motor. I'm going to lay the EGR gasket onto the valve, thread the bolts in, just a few threads there to hold our gasket in place and help us line everything up without worrying about holding everything together. Reinstall the EGR valve. As you can see, the fact that we pre-threaded the bolts into the gasket keeps everything lined up nicely. Makes it a lot easier to see what we're doing while we line it all up here. Using a 10 millimeter socket and ratchet, tighten the bolts down. Torque the bolts to 20 foot-pounds. Reinstall the EGR tube into your truck. Reinstall the tube into its slot in the intake manifold. Reinstall your clip onto the intake manifold. Secure the EGR tube in place. Reinstall the bolts into the EGR valve. Tighten the bolts down with an 8mm socket and ratchet. Torque the bolts on the EGR tube to 20 foot-pounds. Reinstall the electrical connector. Snap the red safety tab back into place. Reinstall the end of the airbox with the silicone gasket over the end of your throttle body. Tighten up the bolt behind the oil fill cap and behind the alternator with a 10mm socket and ratchet and an extension. Reconnect the intake air temp sensor. Drop the lower air filter housing back onto its mounting locations. Be sure the air filter is fully seated into the housing. Reinstall the intake tube onto the air box and the PCV breather hose. Lock the lid of the air box back onto its hinge. Close it. Lock it back down and tighten the intake tube clamp with a flat blade screwdriver.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope this video helped you out. Next time you need parts for your car, please visit oneauto.com. Also check out our other helpful how-to as well as diagnosis videos.